Today, as you all know, we're here to discuss President Biden's fiscal year 2025 budget request for the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. We always appreciate the presence of Martha Williams, the Director of the Service, before our committee. Thank you for appearing today, and welcome back. We have heard time and time again in our committee that wildlife conservation works best for people and for species when it's collaborative, when it's inclusive, when it's proactive. And Director Williams leads the service with those thoughts in mind. The President's fiscal year 2025 budget request also embodies, we believe, this approach, and we look forward to hearing more about it from you today as our witness. The President's budget request includes $1.9 billion for the Fish and Wildlife Service. That's a 10% increase in funding over fiscal year 2024 enacted levels. And one of the things we'll get into in the course of our hearing is that's 10% is not an insignificant increase, as you know. But I always like to ask, compared to what? And I'd like to look at the increases in the last couple of years, or the cuts in the last couple of years that were proposed in this administration or the previous administration. But the increase of 10%, coupled with the investments that we made, in no small part from this committee room, but through the bipartisan infrastructure law and through the Inflation Reduction Act, would provide the service with its support it needs to carry out its many important missions. Specifically, the President's proposed budget would support the Fish and Wildlife Service's work to conserve habitat, to combat climate change, to address biodiversity loss, and to maintain our national wildlife refuges, which we're all very proud of. All of these initiatives protect our planet while helping to drive our economy at the same time. And a reasonable question is, how would the President's budget support these efforts? Well, first, the budget request includes some $602 million for the National Wildlife Refuge System. That's, I believe, 14 or 15% increase from fiscal year 2024's enacted levels. This funding would support habitat conservation as well as law enforcement and visitor services at over some 500 national wildlife refuges across the country. We've got 2 of them in Delaware. How many does West Virginia have?
Have wildlife?
Yeah, wildlife refuges.
Just one, I think.
Okay, all right. 2 weeks ago, I was privileged to visit one of Delaware's 2 national wildlife refuges. It's called the Bombay Hook National Wildlife Refuge. It's in the central part of our state. Imperiled species such as red knot and piping plover birds call this refuge home. And people come literally from all over the world to see these species in their natural habitat. They also come to hike, they come to bicycle, and they come to hunt in these special places. And when they do, they support our local economies. And I think the same is true in refuges in every one of our other 49 states. The administration's budget request also includes funding increases for programs focused on stemming biodiversity loss, including notable increases for Endangered Species Act planning and consultation and recovery efforts. Why are these investments in biodiversity important? Well, for a couple of reasons. One is our food system relies on biodiversity for pest control, for pollination, and for soil fertility. And when our forests and oceans are healthy and biodiverse, they absorb more carbon dioxide, which is a good thing. We also rely on diverse ecosystems to provide us with clean water to drink. For all of these reasons, and for more, biodiversity loss has significant economic impacts. According to a recent report, I believe it was by J.P. Morgan, biodiversity loss cost the global economy an estimated $20 trillion per year. When I saw that number, I had my staff to double check, and I said, "Is that trillion with a T?" And they said, "That is $20 trillion with a T. It's a ton of money." Fiscal year 2025 budget request also details how the Fish and Wildlife Service is implementing the Inflation Reduction Act by incorporating nature-based solutions into ecosystem restoration. For example, the service is working with U.S. Department of Agriculture, with Ducks Unlimited, and with the Arkansas Game and Fish Commission to enhance more than 5,000 acres of wetlands in Arkansas, which we were joined by a colleague from Arkansas. Specifically, the service will restore the wetlands' natural ability to capture, store, and release rainwater and mitigate the effects of severe weather events. We have seen firsthand in the first state, my state, and in many other states, that nature-based solutions actually do work. When Hurricane Sandy damaged the Prime Hook National Wildlife Refuge in our state, the Fish and Wildlife Service restored the refuge with climate resilience in mind. And not only did the restoration effort to conserve habitat and benefit endangered species, it also addressed long-standing flooding issues in a nearby community. We call that in our state a win-win situation. That's what we're always looking for. Furthermore, the budget request of the President builds on our Inflation Reduction Act investments by including funding increases for programs like Partners for Fish and Wildlife and the Coastal Program. These programs are focused on improving ecosystems as well as coastal resiliency through partnerships with states, partnerships with tribes, and partnerships with landowners. And the President's budget request complements the bipartisan infrastructure law by enabling the service to continue implementing successful programs like the National Fish Passage Program. This program funds aquatic ecosystem restoration projects while supporting local economies. In addition to implementing the agency's own bipartisan infrastructure law, Inflation Reduction Act funding, the service is faced with an increasingly heavy workload as a result of Congress's investments in other agencies. The Fish and Wildlife Service's role in the federal permitting process is especially important, given the historic passage of these laws. As part of its congressionally mandated responsibilities, the service must consult with other agencies to ensure that we are deploying the investments from the bipartisan infrastructure law as well as from the Inflation Reduction Act, and issuing permits in a way that does not jeopardize species. However, neither the bipartisan infrastructure law nor the Inflation Reduction Act included funding for the service's responsibilities relating to permitting. So in other words, Congress increased the number of environmental reviews that the service must complete without providing the resources necessary to meet the increased workload. Fortunately, the President's 2025 budget would provide the service with adequate resources to improve efficiencies in environmental review process while also protecting species. And I would just add, I think we can do both, and I believe we must do both. As our colleagues on this committee oftentimes hear me say, we need to find out what works and do more of that. And having said that, we look forward to hearing from Director Williams today on what is working and perhaps what isn't working, and how the President's 2025 budget will support the Fish and Wildlife Service's important work.